Good evening, everyone. Chip Cooper for FTC Guardian and my partner, Alan Cutts. We're coming to you for the last Hangout in the month of May. And, we're a little bit late, and I apologize. In fact, I was thinking right before we got live here on the air that for almost 3 years now, we've been doing these Hangouts. Is that right, Alan? Something like that?
Yep.
3 or 4. We've never failed yet to have to cancel one because of technical difficulties. We've come real close about 5 or 6 times, and today is one of them. We had a huge thunderstorm come through here a little while ago, and it fried my webcam and my mouse and a couple of other things. So I'm now actually coming to you on the internal webcam in my notebook computer. Probably doesn't look quite as good as it normally does, but that's fine. So everybody's here. And Alan, do you have any comments you want to make? And we'll just get started after you.
I'm just going to make the one, and I'll do it now since we have a lot of people online. We've been receiving a lot of emails from folks about your privacy policy updating. I'm sure if you're anything like me, you've received 100 or maybe 200 emails from people saying we've updated our privacy policy. We've got you covered. The very first Hangout in June. This really isn't anything that you needed to rush to do. Does it need to be done? Yes, but it doesn't need to be rushed to be done unless you're actually physically located in the EU, doing business specifically in the EU. Don't be all that concerned about it. Chip has been knee deep in this stuff for the last 3 to 4 months. As a matter of fact, he just visited with the FTC last week. Went to another technology conference specifically about all this stuff. So what we're going to do is in the first week of June, the very first Hangout in June, not the first week of June, the first Hangout in June, we're going to walk you through exactly how to update your privacy policy. And guess what? You too will be able to send out an email to all your subscribers and tell them that you've updated your privacy policy, because that's what you should do when you make substantial changes to your privacy policy. We're going to do that in the first Hangout in June. So don't worry, don't fret. We've got you covered. And Chip's going to walk through how to add the GDPR piece into your current privacy policy, and everybody will be good. That's all I have.
Okay, so just to add to what Alan just said, you know that in the members area, we have a special place that's just been added for documents related to GDPR. We've got a DPA and some other documents there. By the time we have this first Hangout in June, we will have another document there, which will be a privacy policy update for GDPR, as Alan just mentioned. So there will be a document there. There is not one right now, but there will be one then, and we'll explain it at that time. So be on the lookout for that. Everything's going to be fine after I believe it's the second week in June. We'll have you covered on that. All right.
Yeah,
so let me see.
And the good news is GDPR took a big swing last week on May 25th and went after Google and Facebook for about $8 billion. So let them pave the path for everybody else. On May 25th, I think they hit each of them for like $4 billion or $4.5 billion. So let the GDPR pave the path with Google and Facebook, while all the little guys work it out in the background.
That's true. All right. So let me see if I can share my screen here. And Alan, you tell me if you can see it. You should be able to.
Yep.
Okay, there it is. FTC Disclosure Workshop, Generally Expected Results. And this is going to have an interesting twist to it. Alan already mentioned that this past week, I went to an event in Washington, D.C., where Lois Greisman spoke, who we'll have a picture of her in a minute, but she's a fairly high-ranking official at the Federal Trade Commission. And it just so happened, by coincidence, that she was on a panel discussion, and she was the lead speaker on the very topic that we're covering tonight. So we're going to have some really interesting information from her that I've taken from this conference and from a brief private conversation with her. So after her presentation. So let's move ahead. You see the slide, the title slide there. And the housekeeping announcement: the presentation is for informational purposes only. It is not legal advice, and we're not affiliated with the Federal Trade Commission. All right, so let's jump into testimonial types. And you remember we were talking about success story testimonials. But first, let's distinguish success story testimonials from just general opinion type, non-specific testimonials. And here you see in yellow with the first bullet there, something that is not specific. It cannot be measured. It cannot be proved true or false. It's just a very subjective statement. I'm now able to maintain a healthy weight, right? You can't measure it. It's just a very subjective statement. But then below, by contrast, the success story testimonial is a very specific statement regarding a specific result or specific performance. The Federal Trade Commission views these types of testimonials, again known as success story in our world, but the FTC uses the term aspirational testimonials. And so if we continue with an example from the weight loss space, it would be I lost 10 pounds in the first month. Specific number of pounds, specific time frame, measurable, can be proven true or false. So we're not going to be talking about the first type of general opinion type. In fact, they are unregulated. No risk whatsoever, not regulated by the Federal Trade Commission. And they are analogous to a form of ad statement known as puffery. We've had, I think, at least two, possibly three, if I can remember correctly now, thinking back over the last 2 or 3 years, Hangouts on puffery, because again, it is not regulated as an ad claim, and it's risk-free for that reason. So this is sort of the other side of that coin, and let's proceed. So here is something that everyone needs to really understand. This is a fundamental principle, and that is when an advertiser, right? And that is you, if you are an internet marketer, marketing and selling your own products or services, right? Or if you're an agency, it's your client. Your client is the advertiser. So when an advertiser places a success story testimonial, and again, the example was I lost 10 pounds or lose 10 pounds in the first month, the FTC says by virtue of publishing that success story testimonial, you are making an ad claim that consumers can expect the same results. So when you think about it, the typical success story testimonial is a very positive result in terms of weight loss or earning claim or something like that. Obviously, you want a testimonial as to who is successful, who has succeeded in something noteworthy to help you sell your products and services or your clients' products or services. So you'll rarely see the post of a testimonial that is mediocre or even worse, right? So it's a very successful implementation of your product or service. However, again, this is the key. The FTC says that that claim or posting that produces an implied claim that consumers can just about expect the same thing. So that's a problem. So it requires substantiation. But the big question I'm often asked is, okay, can we disclaim this in some way? Can we disclaim the fact that this success story is sort of a superstar kind of person, but the average person, can generally expect a lot less? Well, if we move ahead, we see that prior to 2009, it was very, very simple to post a disclaimer of typicality. And you see that term there in the headline right below the since 2009. A disclaimer of typicality, meaning simply your results may vary, results not typical. And these two types of typicality disclaimers were working fine, very easy for marketers prior to 2009 to put the superstar testimonial on the sales page, right? And then just in small print below, results not typical, your results may vary. That was the disclaimer. It worked. Now, since 2009, it won't work alone. You'll see these types of disclaimers, but by themselves, they're no longer effective. And you see the big arrow pointing at the very bottom of the slide. What is now required since 2009 is a disclosure, not a disclaimer, but a disclosure of generally expected results, what an average or typical consumer can reasonably expect. And this is a huge change by the Federal Trade Commission, and a number of marketers have gotten into some serious trouble. About a typicality disclaimer that doesn't work anymore, and the marketer here obviously has created all sorts of issues for himself or herself, not the least of which is the photoshopped image, the before and after image of a customer who is a customer who's used this hormone enhancer. Obviously, that's more for comic relief because it's clearly Photoshopped. The heads are the same, but the bodies are not, and it's just ridiculous. But here's where I want to point out: results not typical. You see the arrow pointing there. Individual results may vary. That's the typicality disclaimer that was perfectly fine before '09, but no longer effective. So that's a bad example. But here is a good one. This is Nutrisystem. You may recall last year we had a Hangout devoted very specifically to the way Nutrisystem uses testimonials. In fact, if you're interested, I'd highly recommend that you search in our member area on Nutrisystem or the Nutrisystem model, and you'll see a lot of information in that Hangout about how they successfully use a couple of strategies that we think are pretty good. But here is a simple testimonial. Sydney lost 68 pounds. It does not say in 10 months or a year or whatever. It just says she lost this amount of weight. And you see the arrow at the top with an asterisk pointing to the disclosure at the bottom. And this is the generally expected results disclosure. Here is a classic example. Very, very simple. It doesn't have to be, a paragraph or anything. It's simply expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. So the idea here is, if you're a typical consumer, you see this attractive young lady, you see that she's very happy about her results, not measurable, but then we see right below, expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds a week. And so the consumer should understand, well, that's what I should reasonably expect. And that's exactly what the FTC requires. So we have a big question here, and that is what you're doing for your products or services, or for your clients if you're an agency. What specific guidance do we have regarding how to come up with a disclosure regarding generally expected results? What does the FTC tell us that we can do? What does the FTC tell us, if anything, how to go about doing it, right? Because it's really pretty simple to say expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds a month, but what if we're involved in a situation that's more complicated? We'll get to that in just a minute. And I submit that there are at least two. Well, there's one, the one that follows this one. This one is clearly an example of the current rule that I just went through, right? And if you look there at the very top, you'll see a citation to the Code of Federal Regulations, 16 CFR, and then the number there. So the Code of Federal Regulations is the publication of federal agency rules and regulations. And this one relates to consumer endorsements or testimonials, same thing. So if you're interested in looking at some more examples, you can simply Google this, 16 CFR 255.2, and you'll go in there and see a lot more information. We're going to focus on two examples. Example number 2. So I'm going to try to skim through this pretty quickly because it illustrates the main point. An advertisement disseminated by a company that sells heat pumps presents endorsements from 3 individuals who state that after installing the company's heat pumps in their homes, the monthly utility bills went down by $100, $125, and $150, respectively. The ad will likely be interpreted as conveying that such savings are representative of what consumers who buy the company's heat pump can generally expect. So this is the general rule. If this is the testimonial, most people, according to the FTC, will believe they can achieve the same result, okay? But then this is where we get into some issues with the rules that are promulgated by the FTC. The advertiser does not have substantiation for that representation because, in fact, less than 20% of purchasers will save $100 or more, right? So you see that the typical consumer, in actual fact, actually achieves far less of a saving than any of the 3 testimonialists. A disclosure such as results not typical, or these testimonials are based on experiences of a few people that are not likely to have similar results, is insufficient to prevent this ad from being deceptive, because in consumers will interpret the ad as conveying that the specified savings are representative of what consumers can expect, right? So if you look down at the very bottom, the ad is less likely to be deceptive if it clearly and conspicuously discloses the generally expected savings, etc. There are multiple ways that disclosure could be phrased, of course, if it's true, right? The average homeowner saves $35 a month, or the typical family saves $50 per month during cold months and $20 a month in warm months, or most families save 10% on their utility bill. So these three examples of disclosures are the correct ones, given the fact that the average consumer enjoys a far less reduction of their utility bills than the testimonialists indicate. So that is a walkthrough, an example number 2 that appears in the CFR of the general rule that we just talked about, and exactly how the FTC would recommend that the disclosures be modified. Now we get to something that I think is extremely important. I'll tell you why in just a minute. This is example 4, and it's an advertisement of a weight loss product that features a formerly obese woman, right? Very overweight. And she says this in the ad, and this is unbelievable. It'll blow you away. This is a quote. "Every day I drank 2 Weight Away shakes." Obviously, that's the product, Weight Away shakes. "Every day I drank 2 of them, ate only raw vegetables," incredible, I could never do it, "and exercised vigorously for 6 hours at the gym." Every day, 6 hours at the gym. By the end of 6 months, I had gone from 250 pounds to 140 pounds. And if you look down at the very bottom, underlined in yellow with a yellow arrow, that's a loss of 110 pounds in 6 months, right? But she didn't say, "I take weight away and I lost 110 pounds in 6 months." She gave very specific facts that led to that kind of weight loss. First of all, she's obese. She weighs 250 pounds. That's one factor. And then she only drank 2 shakes a day. She only ate raw vegetables, and she exercised vigorously for 6 hours a day in the gym. Nobody's going to do that. So let's continue. The advertisement accurately describes the woman's experience, and as a result is within a range that would generally be experienced by an extremely overweight individual who consumed Weight Away shakes, only ate raw vegetables, and exercised as the endorser did, which is 6 hours a day, right? And then we finish with this paragraph. "Because the endorser clearly describes the limited and truly exceptional circumstances under which she achieved her results, the ad is not likely to convey that consumers who weigh less or use Weight Away under less extreme circumstances will lose 110 pounds in 6 months." So basically, this is the testimonial with the blue text at the very top. There's no need to have any disclosure, because the testimonial itself is the disclosure that indicates that an obese person who goes to that extreme set of actions, would lose that kind of weight. And so the average person is going to say, "I would never do it. I'm not obese." And it really doesn't indicate what, I might generally expect. So here's the lesson to take away, I believe, from this example. This is FTC policy coming out of the Code of Federal Regulations, that these circumstances matter, right? And another thing that's important is the example doesn't say that the testimonial should say this would not apply to people who are not overweight and don't work out in the gym and don't eat raw vegetables. Obviously, that's obvious to the person reading it. So there's no need to restate or state the negative. It's clearly indicated here. So these circumstances, I think, are very important, as indicated by the Federal Trade Commission with this example number 4. So the question going forward in this presentation is, how do you use these very specific examples or characteristics of this particular testimonial proposed by the FTC in its example? How do we use that to maybe enhance our success story testimonials. So here's the big question: is there a silver bullet? If you've seen any of my webinars, I always use this to indicate, whether or not there is a simple and easy solution for FTC compliance. Generally, the answer, of course, is no. And is there a simple and easy solution here? And the answer is no. But I'm trying to make a case for you that we can use example number 4 and maybe come out ahead. Now, this is a picture of Lois Greisman. Her title is Associate Director of the FTC Division of Marketing Practices, and she was at the ERSP Summit in Washington this past week. I attended it. There weren't but maybe 30 or 40 people attending, so it's not a massive crowd. She was very personable. She talked with a lot of us individually and in groups before and after her presentation. She was, I think, just absolutely perfect. But there's one thing that she didn't do, and I certainly agree with her. I mean, if I were in her position, I would have done the same thing, and that is she refused to get pinned down on exactly the recipe for, coming up with a success story testimonial that would fly under FTC rules, right? Because she's one of the top people in the Federal Trade Commission. If she went on the stage in one of these events and said, well, if you do it this way, this way, this way, it's going to be fine. But then there are all sorts of other circumstances involving context of the ads, as we'll see in a minute, and somebody does it and it gets nailed by the FTC, she's in a little bit of trouble, right? Because she didn't have time to look at all the other circumstances and give an opinion. So the FTC is not going to give advisory opinions. She was sort of negative on some of these things, and there was a whole group of people, me included, by the way, who attempted to pin her down to try to find the magic recipe, and we just didn't come up with it. But anyway, that's Lois, and
I think you should
really
add
enjoyed meeting her.
I think you should add that Frank Kern was there trying to nail her down.
Yeah, Frank Kern is a member of ERSP. In fact, he was on. He made a brief presentation early in the afternoon. And Alan and I know Frank. We participated in one of his programs a couple of years ago. I said hello to him, and he even tried. And Frank, if you guys know Frank Kern or have seen him speak, he's far more charming than I am, right? He's a very funny guy. He's easy to know. How could you not like Frank Kern? He's bigger than life. And he's very witty and funny, and I just love to listen to him talk. And so if the rest of us were attorneys in there, right, trying to pin her down in a very technical way, which of course she didn't allow us to do, but we gave it the try. But Frank, if it was anybody that was going to be successful, he would charm her, right? It's coming up with something specific, but Frank Kern was unable to do it. But anyway, that was the effort he made. So. How do we develop generally expected results disclosures, not a disclaimer? And let's use it as an example here for this discussion, an earnings claim in an ad for a type of course that, for example, if you take the course and apply it, you're going to make money, right? You take training, you learn how to do something online, and you make money online. So as you can see, the sub bullets there under the first bullet is if you're involved in an online business, which everybody on this call should be, that there are a lot of factors that go into success online. One would be completion of the course, and one would be completing it and actually learning something rather than just going through it. The amount of effort that you use to be successful, any prior experience you have in business or certainly online business, your aptitude. Some people have better aptitude, higher levels of aptitude than others, and the time period in which you apply the effort and your prior experience and all that. So there are probably some other factors as well. So we know that some combination of these factors are going to determine success. So it's not as simple as 1 to 2 pounds a week. So again, if you look at the next bullet, I say focus on the qualifying circumstances. Remember that example 4 about the obese woman, and then develop a reliable survey or survey evidence based on these qualifying circumstances. And the ultimate test after all this is done, and we're going to see another part of this example, I believe, on the next slide, is this. After you come up with your disclosure, right, this is the test. This is what you need to ask yourself. And this is what Lois Greisman was basically preaching over and over again as everyone tried to pin her down. Basically, does the disclosure convey the generally expected results to consumers, right? I mean, does it really do the job? And if the answer is, if you have a sort of a high level of confidence that it does, you're probably going to be fine. If not, you're probably not. So let's take a look at an example that I've come up with, right? And this, again, is based on the course using qualifying circumstances, right? So you can begin this disclosure, and note that this disclosure is not as simple as expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds a week, period. That's a very pithy, short, brief disclosure. This one, because it involves these qualifying circumstances, is longer, right? So here we go. You should always start out with the typicality disclosure, which we know alone is not going to be effective, but it adds to the idea we're trying to convey here. So start out, results are not typical. Then we continue. Your initial results will depend on the following circumstances, right? And this is what we believe is generally expected results, right? Your completion of the course, let's go back. Depend on the following circumstances. 1, your completion of the course, your consistent commitment to the program of at least 10 hours a week or at least one a year for 1 year, the viability of your content and the size of your target market. Now, if you think about those characteristics, it's sort of analogous to the obese woman eating nothing but raw vegetables and exercising for 6 hours a day and all that stuff, right? So depending on whether you complete the course and you consistently commit to the program for at least 10 hours a week, for at least a year, and you have really good content, and you have a good size of a target market, most students under these circumstances, and then there's an asterisk there and a blank. We'll get to that in a minute. And then finally, in parens, based on a reliable survey of a customer group that qualifies for the same circumstances. So basically, you're saying that this statement is based on actual research, an actual survey of customers that match that group that has those characteristics, right? So now we go into some examples of how we might fill in the blank there. We go to the 3 asterisks, generate at least blank dollars in the first year. Well, we get this information from the reliable survey of customers, right? Second possibility is generate revenue in the range of blank dollars to blank dollars in the first year. And then the third one is less specific, is generate consistent supplemental income. Now, the first 2 bullets are probably aimed at a higher level of income in the first year than simply than what you would expect normally to see in the blanks, right? A less risky and a lower number of dollars would be generate consistent supplemental income, because the first 2 would generally be more of the superstar, in the range of the superstar testimonialist or the so-called lifestyle guy who's able to quit his corporate job and work. As you can see at the bottom there, the lifestyle that Tim Ferriss indicated, right? The 4-hour work week, escape 9 to 5. This is the title of his book by Tim Ferriss, very popular a few years ago. The 4-hour work week, escape 9 to 5, live anywhere, and join the new rich. So if you think about this and you come up with reasonable numbers, and it's all based on a reliable survey of your customers, and it passes the test, that we had in this last slide, you can see it again right at the bottom, where it actually does. I mean, after you do the survey, you know what most of your customers expect. And then if it passes that test, you probably should. But there's one point that Lois Greisman continued to make, and quite frankly, I don't think it's fair, but it's a concern of hers. And her concern is that it's generally known by the Federal Trade Commission, and I think generally known among marketers as well, that people who buy how to make money on the internet or and weight loss or anything like this, they typically don't try very hard, or they don't even really give it much of an effort, and they don't really make much money at all. Almost everybody. And a few years ago, when I learned this fact, it shocked me. I thought everybody's making money, but it's not true. So her concern was with these earnings claims that are made by testimonialists, very few people make any money at all. And she says that there should be some indication of that in generally expected results. I disagree, because I think if you indicate the group who's willing to commit to those characteristics, then I think you can come up with a generally expected results for that group. The key to it is this: what if you come up with with a good number at the bottom in terms of one of the three bullets, and you've got a good group in terms of the characteristics, but your size is too small. The size of this group is too small and not representative overall of your overall customer number. So there are all sorts of factors to consider, and there is no specific advice, no specific anything given by the Federal Trade Commission, only that example number 4, where those factors were considered very important. So you've got to be able to conduct a reliable survey and come up with the right number, and understand that that if you overstate it, you can be in trouble. All right, so let's move on without beating this dead horse here. So how do you create this reliable customer survey? Now, I'll be the first to admit I'm not an expert in customer surveys. I'm an attorney, right? But I do have some bullets here that will help to guide you. One is it's got to support the claim itself, not just customer satisfaction. It's got to be specific. It's got to match these qualifying circumstances, if we have those here, which is what we're talking about. And the design of it is pretty important. The layout, questions, response options, etc. The sample size has to be meaningful, and the method that how it's delivered is extremely important, whether it's in written form, whether it's like a Survey Monkey type thing, or whether you're actually telephoning customers and talking to them online and asking questions and qualifying them and recording the answers in a fairly scientific way. And then finally, who develops it? Is it something you do in-house, which is something that would probably have a little bit less credibility than something that an outside consultant does or assists you in doing, because the outside consultant theoretically gives you a little more credibility. So those are some of the factors to consider. So the summary here is, before we get into Q&A, is that success story testimonials involve specific performance claims, that the net impression that a consumer has after seeing one is that most consumers can achieve the same results regardless of whether it's a superstar or not. The typicality disclaimers alone won't work, which the classic example is your results may vary. You need, of course, to disclose generally expected results. There's no silver bullet. There's no absolute recipe, clearly indicated by Lois Greisman. You see the test there in red. Does the disclosure convey generally expected results, the actual ones? And then finally, understand the risk and act accordingly. So those are the final takeaways, and the tags that I'm going to be adding tomorrow morning when I upload this video are testimonials, success story testimonials, generally expected results, and customer surveys. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm going to go back to Alan and ask him if he has questions. There you are, Alan. I can see you. I can't hear you, though.
Now?
I can hear you now. So what do we have in terms of questions?
Okay, hang on. I want to look at this date up. June 12th. Edward says you probably need another bullet, and you're going to be super lucky, and you've got to be super lucky.
Yeah. Well, also let me say this, and I learned this phrase at the second conference I attended this past week. I've never heard it this way, and we can talk about it more the second week in June when we get into our GDPR Hangout number 5, right? The discussion was involving whether smaller companies that don't have the huge budget. I mean, there were companies there that had spent over $1 million just on one aspect of GDPR compliance. $1 million just for one piece of it, right? And so the question was, how do the smaller companies do it? And the answer is, you don't. I mean, you can't do it, in terms of what was called, quote, perfect compliance. And that's the term I'd never heard before. I always thought there was either compliance or not. I mean, you're either compliant or you're not. And this one said, because the compliance burden is so heavy that the smaller companies cannot be expected reasonably to be in perfect compliance, but that didn't mean they had no responsibility. They needed to, get on with becoming compliant with GDPR. Maybe not perfectly, but in compliance and striving to close that gap. So I started thinking about the term perfect compliance in connection with these success story testimonials, right? Well, there is no perfect compliance because the FTC, as I've said several times, does not have, the perfect template for doing it. What I've tried to do is give you some very specific guidelines on how to do it. And I think if you're not in, quote, perfect compliance, but you're reasonably close, I don't think the FTC is going to come after you. In fact, if Lois Greisman were looking at some of maybe this example, I'm just guessing, I don't know, because I tried to pin her down with exactly this example, exactly this one, because I was the last guy in line after about 5 people fired off questions that she said, no, no, no. I said, all right, I think I can do it. And I went through this. She said, well, it all depends on context, blah, blah, blah. So, okay, it didn't work. But I'm thinking if Lois or some of her colleagues were reviewing it, they would say, that's not perfect compliance. And it's, but they really went through the steps. They had a survey that was meaningful. It wasn't just a BS survey, right? It was a survey. And another thing that she mentioned, and it's also in the CFR, is that we're not required under these circumstances to have an extremely expensive, extremely technical survey, the way we are if we're selling not pharmaceuticals, but supplements, right? We've got to have a very scientific survey that's relatively expensive. You got to bring in experts, a double-blind, placebo tested, all this stuff according to scientific evidence. But when we're talking about a survey here for ad claim substantiation or testimonial, same thing, the FTC knows that we're not going to be held to that high a standard. So you have a reasonably good survey, and you have a really well-defined list of characteristics that really truly match what you want to do, and you come up with the actual disclosure that fits well and is reasonable. I don't think anybody's going to have anything to say, even though if you put them on the speaker's platform and said, all right, here it is, Lois, now rip it apart, she'd probably come up and find some things she didn't like about it, right? But I think something less than perfect compliance, but reasonable compliance in this area is going to work just fine. So
we have a question from Susan. If I'm teaching techniques in PowerPoint and various mobile apps, is it safe to keep testimonials focused on how easy it was to learn and whether I explain things clearly? It's more broad.
Well, if someone says it was easy to learn and it was clearly presented and it was very logical and therefore I was able to learn it and retain it quickly, that is a subjective thing, right? I mean, it's like saying I feel so good about my weight. I'm confident that my clothes fit better, and I'm confident about myself because I lost weight. So that's not something that is measurable and specific and falls into the category that we've been talking about tonight. It falls into that, very general kind of statement. The material was excellent. I enjoyed it. It was easy to understand. It was well presented. The speaker was just right on target. I really related to it. All those things are subjective, and it's sky's the limit. There's no regulation on them at all. So as long as you stay in that space, you're in great shape.
I want you guys to get. I mean, I just saw Edward post something about that. He says, "How are you expected to have access to all this survey data, this stuff, if you're starting out a brand new business?" My first month online, he's happy to be a member for his first month online.
That is a precise question, because if you actually Google that citation in CFR, if you just put it in Google and hit search and start reading it, and it's real fine print and it's 5 or 6 pages. But what you'll learn there is that prior to the time that the FTC changed, just prior to 2009, you remember your results may vary would work before 2009, and it was really easy for marketers just to put it there and it's over. You don't have to do any testing or anything. So before the FTC went ahead with upgrading, in their view, this approach requiring generally expected results, they had they put out publicly that they were seeking comments from the industry, from marketers and marketer groups. If we'd been around back then, we might have filed some brief, Alan and I, saying it's ridiculous, it's too burdensome, blah, blah, blah. So they wanted to hear all of that. Some of it they agreed with, a lot of it they explained away and said it didn't matter, right? But one of the comments I remember from reading, I read it about 2 weeks ago, was that somebody said it's going to be very discriminatory against small startup businesses because they haven't been in business long enough to have a customer list that was a sample size of any sufficiency for doing any kind of a survey. And the FTC response was, well, until you get enough, whatever that is, which is undefined, you can do the subjective ones. You can still go to customers who are happy and satisfied and have them make statements not about how much money they made or how many pounds they lost or whatever. They just say, I love the course. It was great. It was wonderful. It helped me.
Sounds to me like nobody from the FTC has ever owned a business, because in your business, when you have 0 customers and you're trying to get that first one, what do you say?
Well, you either say yourself that that'll help you do something, or you get customers that love your program but are not specific about results, but say what a great training session it was and how well presented it was, all that good stuff. Yeah. They're happy customers. They're satisfied customers, but not that they lost, 10 pounds in the first month or something. So once you get a little bit out of the gate, so to speak, then you have more of a customer base to draw from. And then I think, the FTC wasn't worried about it. They worry about consumers.
Yep.
They don't worry too much about businesses who are selling stuff.
Yep. All right. So we've got one from Walter. How would one handle claims when selling, as an affiliate rather than a product vendor? As somebody who sells affiliate stuff, you really have to be careful about the affiliate offers you promote.
That's right. And as an affiliate, you're an advertiser, right? You're driving traffic back to your principal's website. They convert and pay you a commission, right?
Yeah, but what I'm saying and I think what he's saying is he, as an affiliate, needs to be concerned about what the vendor is saying, because he's promoting a product, and the vendor could be saying, they lost 10 pounds in 10 months.
If the vendor that the affiliate is representing, if the vendor says, here's 10 testimonials we have, you can put them on your website. Yeah, then if you're an affiliate and you're given these, they're not your testimonials that you received from the customer that you sent, then you need to be careful about it, right? And you're still responsible for it. They were given to you, but you published them. You put them out there as an advertiser, you're responsible. And we all know, as we've talked about in several Hangouts, the affiliate manager is responsible for looking at what you're saying as an affiliate. And it's supposed to manage you and monitor you. And if you're stepping over the line, call you, step back.
Well, I mean, everybody knows, and everybody knows that's why we have a closed affiliate program, is we want to make sure that people understand compliance. They're not saying things they shouldn't be saying, promoting FTC Guardian. Another one from Shelley is, can we say something like 5 out of 20 people surveyed experience an average of blank by taking this course?
Well, you can say that if you have a survey that supports it. I mean, that's the answer. And that's sort of what Lois Greisman would have said, or similar to things she said on on her panel. She would have said two things. She would have said what I just said, assuming you have a reliable survey that supports it, number one. And then number two, does it pass the test of what customers can generally expect? But if your answer to the first one is correct, you're going to probably pass the test in every situation, right? So, and there are no, as I've said before, no silver bullets, no magic formula, but that's the process, and that's what you need to be able to satisfy.
Okay, that's all of our questions.
Think about this: the whole foundation of the process I just recommended was based on not something that came out of here. It was based on that example of the obese woman who lost all that weight in a certain period of time by doing impossible things. And I took that and said, well, let's extrapolate that a little bit and then see how we can apply it to the same types of characteristics. I think that's the key to it. And that's the most specific thing we know about.
Yeah, and Philip, I'll answer for Philip. He must be an affiliate marketer. He says, what if we promote an offer as an affiliate for products with websites who put specific claims? Do we need to keep checking back on the affiliate offers we promote in case they're doing something wrong? Absolutely. Because it's your list. It's your list. However you got that list, you're sending your list to that offer. You are just as responsible as the affiliate is. So you need to be very, very concerned about stuff that you're promoting. If you're promoting those offers where you see the guy, standing beside the jet and, getting in the rented Lamborghini and all that kind of crap, yeah, I'd be a little concerned about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was very, very clear. Lois Greisman said, if I see the guy standing with, leaning up on the Lamborghini, I mean, that's a massive red flag flapping. Or, somebody traveling all around the world and not working, the Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week, which is crap. Okay. I mean, I've been involved in my own little business before I met Alan Cutts, and we've been involved in FTC Guardian, and we know that making money online is difficult, right? It's not easy. Nothing is easy. In fact, I don't know of any way to make money legitimately that's easy. It really isn't. You've got to work at it. And I read the book, the Tim Ferriss book, 4-Hour Work Week, several years ago, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, if you spent 3 or 4 years working yourself, 100 hours a week to set all these funnels and everything up, then after that, you might be able to have enough continuity income to actually travel around for, drop out for 6 months and travel around and check, as you go around the world, check the internet and answer a few emails and enjoy all the continuity income. But it would be a lot of work to set it up.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah. It says, wouldn't you need, how do you know, got one from Joanne. The first one, I guess it would start with Suzanne, is wouldn't you need a larger survey than 20 people? That's subjective.
Well, I mean, if you had, say, 60 or 70 customers and you surveyed 20, that might be a meaningful sample. If you had 500 customers and you've only surveyed 20, it probably wouldn't be. Now, here's one thing you can do. In fact, I did a little research earlier today, but I know very little about surveys. I don't even know enough to be dangerous. Right? So, but if you Google meaningful sample for survey, something to that effect, you'll see that there's some websites that actually have an algorithm that will determine what the number would be. If you have your customer base is a certain number and certain variables go in and you hit the number, and it'll generate based on an algorithm what the algorithm says. And it doesn't just give you one number, it gives you a range of numbers, starting with the most reliable number, and then the less reliable, less. So it gives you a range of numbers. So you can go online right now if you don't know how to do that. And there's all sorts of free information there that on various websites. I think SurveyMonkey has one.
Yep.
Where you can learn. So, and there's all sorts of information. I found out earlier today on doing the surveys, the meaningful sample size, all sorts of things. So you can spend probably 3 or 4 hours and learn a lot just in free information online.
Doing surveys is great. We have a exit survey as part of FTC Guardian. Chip probably doesn't even know anything about it. That people. Yeah, we have an exit survey. Yeah, we have an exit survey for people who've been through our webinar and didn't join FTC Guardian, that ask them why they didn't join.
Oh, really?
Like 5 or 6 questions. And we keep track of it. That way we can kind of continue. I mean, Chip, I go to Chip and say, Chip, we need to make changes here or there, or we need to do this or that. Well, that's where I get that information from, is I'm asking people when they don't buy, why they didn't buy. Either they didn't have the money, or they weren't in business yet, or they don't really believe FTC is legitimate, or whatever. I have a series of questions, but we have an exit survey for people who don't purchase after it's over with, who go through the webinar process and don't buy, and that's where my information comes from of what we need to.
Right, and so I know this. Cuts probably knows more than I do about surveys. I know virtually nothing, as I've just admitted. But again, the FTC is not requiring this ultra scientific survey or test that's required for, say, supplements. I mean, that's serious scientific methodology that would have to be approved by other experts in the field. I mean, basically, you've got a bunch of college professors or experts in the field who would have to agree as expert witnesses in the case in court that was the correct way to conduct the survey, that it produced a meaningful result. That's not what we're talking about here. This is far less, and something that if you do a little research and use some online tools, can probably generate a survey that would be sufficient. That's good news.
Yeah. Yeah. And Joanne, it says, your question is would the FTC check my survey and the specifics? It's not so much would the FTC check it. It's just like having testimonials who say they lost 10 pounds in 10 months or whatever that is. You want proof. So if you've got your survey and you keep it active and you keep it live, you've got proof. If everybody ever comes to you, you can say, well, here's the data. Right here it is.
For goodness sakes, don't hide or lose the data, because that's proof that you went through the process.
Yeah. So you want to show proof. I mean, I have 2 or 3 different survey programs I use consistently, and you just want to save that stuff, save that data. So if anybody ever questions you, you have it. You can pull up the IP address. You can pull up the people who went through it, and you can say, bum, 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 this IP address went through it, and this is what they said. So you've got the data.
One comment, and please don't hold me to this, but let's say you do some research on surveys. You actually sign up for maybe a free or low-cost survey online system. And based on, you're doing your own education, you design questions that you think are meaningful. You come up with it yourself, and then you send out emails and you invite people to do it, and you have a meaningful sample size, and then you save the data. And then suppose, and I don't think this is likely to happen, because I think when the FTC says, and that reads your disclosure and it has these specific results and it mentions a survey, they're going to say, wow, that whoever did that is playing the game the way we want it to be played. Now they're going to say, well, was it really a survey, or are they just making this up? They're probably not going to take the time to send you a letter or anything. They've got other people to chase around, right? But assuming they do, and say, send you a letter, we'd like to see your survey for this particular testimonial and the generally expected results. and they look at it, they might be able to pick it apart a little bit and say, well, you could have done better here, here, and here, but you're not going to get fined for that thing.
Yep.
You might get a letter saying we would recommend that you restate the generally expected results or take it down. But if you've gone to that amount of trouble to follow the rules, nothing really bad is going to happen.
Yep.
It's just not. I mean, because it's so indefinite as to exactly what you have to do if you make a reasonable attempt, and not just some BS approach, but I mean, really get into it and try to come up with something that's really correct. And you really ought to know what your customers are doing anyway. I mean, really, I mean, you ought to have some idea that people are succeeding and making money, and maybe some idea of how much, right? Because you don't want to be selling a program that promises results and nobody's getting the results.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's information that you need to know anyway as a marketer, and it's going to help you with a disclosure. The worst that's going to happen is the FTC says, well, the survey wasn't quite scientific enough or something, but you're not going to get busted for it. I guarantee you that. I'm not guaranteeing that.
And I'll throw this out there. If anybody has a real business and you're interested in developing a survey, sign up for a little 30-minute chat. I might be able to help you with that. I've designed a lot of surveys. I designed back in my corporate life where I had we did in corporate America, they have what's called 360s, where they do observations of people. They put it in their file. They're called 360s. Well, I created a thing back in the day because I realized that corporate America really didn't care about these 360s. It was just something to stick in people's file, so that when we went to go fire them, they had all the HR data. They could fire them. So I created a survey system called 360 Lite back 10 years ago. And when I realized 360s were nothing more than a survey based on somebody else's opinion. It wasn't you. It was somebody else's opinion surveying you. So I created a survey system called 360 Lite where they could send the person to it and they could survey the individual. So I learned how to develop questions to get answers in the direction you want them to go to help. I did it for the employees' sake, to help the employees keep their jobs. But if you're interested, I mean, just schedule a time and we can, if it works out.
Cuts has forgotten more than I'll probably ever know about surveys.
So if it's something somebody's interested in, I mean, if you've got a real client base and you're interested in something like that, then schedule just a 30-minute call. We'll decide if it's something workable or not. This is officially our longest hangout ever.
Well, good, because we all know if you don't
until next month.
Until next month. All right. We all know that one of the most powerful strategies or tactics, whichever seems to apply better, is a success story testimonial. I mean, if you've got those, it is a winning proposition for you. I mean, when I buy stuff on Amazon, I read those things. I read them religiously. Because I actually believe that most of them are verified, right? I don't think they're made up. And they carry a lot of weight with me, and I think they do with all consumers. So because these testimonials are so important in your sales and marketing, it's really important that you understand how to go about, presenting them correctly, and understand that there's some leeway here. You don't have to spend a fortune doing the survey. You can do it yourself. And then you're going to be able to pass muster correctly, legally, and really sell some stuff. So, any other questions after all this time? We're done.
We're good.
Very well. So remember, next time we're going to have at least one document for you, maybe two, but it depends on how I decide to work it out. It's going to be the same as what you've seen. It's going to be a Word file, which apparently everybody likes, right? And there's going to be marginal comments, just like the ones you've seen.
And we're going to put it inside the current document, right?
Yeah, we're going to put it in there. It's going to be another Word file. It's probably going to be an integrated privacy policy that includes everything, some GDPR, so you just have one, you don't have two. It's going to be easy to use because it's a Word file. All you got to do is make a few edits, maybe eliminate all those comments on the margin, put it up there.
And then put it inside, go to our other privacy policy, drop it inside there.
Just copy that, just blow that out and paste this in, and then you're in great shape. So we'll
guess what? And then you'll too be able to send out an email to your entire list.
Yeah, you can send them out and
tell them that you've updated your privacy policy. And tell you what, and this is how we did it with FTC Guardian with your affiliate link.
There you go. So we're going to have all that for you. Be sure to attend this one. And we might just send out an email to you in advance to let you download this file, right? So that while we're going through it, you can have, your version of it on the screen and you can be looking at it. In any event, we'll have a share my screen of it, so you'll be able to see it.
Yeah, right. And June 12th. June 12th is the date.
June 12th. Mark it on your calendar. It's going to be a good one. It's going to be our last sort of big one on the fundamentals of GDPR compliance. We're going to have a lot more about some of the smaller points, but this is a big one, this privacy policy. So good night, everyone. Thanks for attending, and we'll see you on June the 12th.
Yep.